but she came back with a baby. They sent the young infertile widow to the sheriff as a bet. When Aisha's husband passed away, the house did not just become quiet, it became empty in a way that words could not describe. The walls still stood strong, the wooden doors still opened and closed, and the small courtyard still received sunlight every morning, but something inside the home had disappeared forever. She was only 24, yet the light in her eyes had already begun to fade. In the first few weeks after his passing, relatives came and went. Some cried with her, some offered advice, some simply came to observe. After 40 days, the visitors slowly stopped coming. The house returned to silence, but this time the silence felt heavier. The village where she lived was small. Everyone knew everyone. News traveled faster than the wind. By the time the first month had ended, people had already started speaking about her future. Some said she should move back to her parents' house. Others said she should remain where she was to protect her late husband's property. But very few asked her what she wanted. There was another whisper that hurt her more than anything else. She had no child. The words followed her everywhere. When she stepped outside to buy vegetables, she felt eyes on her. When she went to fetch water, conversations stopped mid-sentence. Some women looked at her with pity. Others looked at her as if she carried bad luck. The truth was simple. She and her husband had only been married for 1 year. They had planned to see a doctor, but life had been busy, and then everything changed suddenly. No tests had been done, no reports had been made, but the village did not need proof. They had already decided. She cannot have children, someone had said once, and that sentence spread like wildfire. Aisha never defended herself. She did not have the strength. Every night she lay on her simple bed, staring at the ceiling, remembering her husband's laughter. He used to promise her that one day their courtyard would be filled with children running around. He had wanted a big family. She had wanted the same. Now she had only memories. To survive, she began stitching clothes from home. She had always been good at embroidery. Slowly, neighbors started giving her small orders. It was not much money, but it was enough to buy flour, rice, and tea. She worked long hours, her fingers moving carefully through fabric while her mind wandered. Sometimes she would pause and imagine what her life might have been if things were different. She wondered if people would still treat her the same way if she had a child. Would they still call her unlucky? Would they still whisper when she passed by? One afternoon, while delivering stitched clothes to a neighbor, she overheard 2 women talking in the next room. "She is young," one said, "but what is the use? No child, no husband. Such a life is empty." The other woman replied, "May God protect our daughters from such fate." Aisha stood still outside the door, holding the folded clothes tightly against her chest. Her throat felt dry. She wanted to walk away, but her feet refused to move. She felt as if her entire existence had been reduced to 2 words: no child. That evening she did not light the lamp immediately. She sat in the dark courtyard listening to distant sounds of children playing in the street. Their laughter reached her ears like a reminder of what she did not have. Across the village lived the sheriff, a man known for discipline and fairness. He had lost his wife years ago and had raised his young daughter with strict values. He rarely smiled in public, but people respected him. His house was larger, his life more stable, and his name carried weight. The tea stall near the marketplace was where men gathered every evening. They discussed crops, prices, politics, and sometimes people. That was where Aisha's name began to appear more often. One man, known for his careless talk, said, "She is still young. What will she do all her life alone?" Another laughed. "Who will marry her? Everyone knows she cannot get a child." A third man, trying to sound clever, replied, "Maybe the sheriff should marry her. He is a widower too." The group burst into laughter. "Why would he do that?" someone asked. "Let us test it," the first man said jokingly. "If she goes to him with a proposal, I bet he will refuse in a second." It was nothing more than entertainment for them. They did not think about her feelings. They did not think about the damage their words could cause. For them it was just another evening of careless talk. The bet was simple and cruel. They believed that if she approached the sheriff, he would reject her publicly, proving their point. But rumors have legs. Within days, the suggestion reached the ears of a few older women in the neighborhood. Instead of stopping the nonsense, some of them found the idea interesting. 2 elderly women decided to visit Aisha one morning. They entered her small home with gentle smiles and sympathetic voices. "You cannot live alone forever," one of them said softly. Aisha served them tea, keeping her eyes lowered. She had grown used to advice. The second woman continued, "The sheriff is also alone. He is a decent man. Perhaps this is a sign." Aisha looked up, surprised. "Me?" she asked quietly. "Yes," they replied. "Why not? You deserve a second chance." For a moment, something inside her heart moved. The idea of rebuilding her life did not sound wrong, but she also knew how people thought of her. "What if he refuses?" she asked. The women exchanged glances. "At least you will know you tried," one of them answered. After they left, Aisha sat alone for hours. The thought would not leave her mind. Was this another way for people to test her? Or was it truly an opportunity? She remembered her husband's words once again. He had always told her not to let fear control her life. He had admired her quiet strength. That night she prayed longer than usual. She did not pray for wealth or status. She prayed for dignity. She prayed for a life where she would not be treated as a burden or a symbol of misfortune. Outside, the village continued its routine. Children ran through dusty streets. Women cooked dinner. Men gathered at the tea stall, laughing without knowing that their joke had reached her ears. They believed she would never dare to approach the sheriff. They believed she would remain silent, hidden behind her small gate. But they did not see the slow change happening inside her. The next morning, as sunlight entered her courtyard, Aisha made a decision, not because of their bet, not because of their gossip, but because she was tired of living as if her life had ended at 24. She chose to believe that her story was not over. She stood in front of her small mirror, adjusting her simple shawl. Her hands trembled slightly, but her eyes held something new: determination. The village still saw her as the young widow who had nothing left. They had no idea that this was only the beginning of a story none of them expected. And far away at the tea stall, the men continued laughing, unaware that the quiet woman they mocked was about to walk into their assumptions and change everything. The morning she decided to go to the sheriff's house, Aisha woke up before sunrise. She had barely slept the night before. Every time she closed her eyes, different thoughts filled her mind. What if he laughed at her? What if he became angry? What if the whole village found out and made her life even harder? But there was another voice inside her that kept whispering, "At least try." The sky was still soft and gray. Birds were beginning to chirp. For a moment, she almost changed her mind. Staying inside her house felt safe. No one could insult her if she did not step out. No one could reject her if she never asked. Yet she knew that living in fear was also a kind of slow pain. She chose her cleanest simple dress. It was light blue with small white embroidery that she had stitched herself. She covered her head neatly and looked at herself in the mirror. She did not see someone weak. She saw someone who had survived loss, loneliness, and endless whispers. After offering a quiet prayer for courage, she stepped out of her house and closed the wooden gate behind her. The walk to the sheriff's home felt longer than usual. Every face she passed made her heart beat faster. A few women noticed her walking with purpose and looked at each other curiously. 2 young boys ran past her, laughing loudly, unaware of the storm in her heart. As she reached the main road, she could see the tea stall from a distance. Some of the same men who had joked about her were sitting there, drinking tea and talking. She kept her eyes lowered and walked past them. One of them noticed her and nudged the other. "Where is she going so early?" he whispered. Another smirked. "Maybe to the market." None of them guessed the truth. The sheriff's house stood at the end of a wide street. It had tall white walls and a strong iron gate. The house looked firm and serious, just like the man who lived inside it. Aisha stopped a few steps away from the gate. Her feet felt heavy. She could turn back now. No one would know. The village would continue gossiping, but nothing new would happen. She took a deep breath. Then she knocked. The sound of her knock echoed louder than she expected. A servant opened the gate slightly and looked at her with surprise. "Yes?" he asked. I would like to speak to the sheriff," she said softly. The servant studied her for a moment, then nodded and went inside. Aisha stood there, feeling every second stretch like an hour. After a short while, the sheriff himself appeared at the door. He looked exactly as people described him: tall, serious, and calm. His expression did not show anger or warmth, only curiosity. "Yes?" he asked in a steady voice. Aisha swallowed her fear. "May I speak with you for a few minutes?" she said. He hesitated for a moment, then opened the gate wider and allowed her to step inside the courtyard. They sat across from each other on simple wooden chairs. The courtyard was neat and quiet. A small tree stood in the corner, and a young girl's shoes were placed near the door. Aisha guessed they belonged to his daughter. The sheriff folded his hands calmly. "What brings you here?" he asked. For a few seconds, her voice refused to come out. Then she remembered why she had come. Not for the village. Not for the bet, but for herself. "I know this may sound unusual," she began carefully, But I came to speak honestly. I have been living alone since my husband passed away, she continued. I respect my late husband's memory, but I am still young. I wish to live a life with dignity and purpose. Big, she paused, trying to control her trembling hands. I have heard that you also live alone, raising your daughter with strength. I do not ask for sympathy. I do not ask for favor. I only ask if you would consider allowing me to rebuild my life respectfully as your wife. The words hung in the air. She lowered her eyes, waiting for his reaction. There was no laughter, no anger. Instead, there was silence. The sheriff leaned back slightly, studying her face. He had expected many things in his life, but this was not one of them. You understand what you are asking, he said calmly. Yes, she replied. You know that people talk. They already do, she answered honestly. He noticed the truth in her voice. She was not speaking with pride. She was speaking with courage. I have a daughter, he said after a pause. Her comfort and future matter to me more than anything. I would never try to replace her mother, Aisha replied gently, but I would care for her with respect. The sheriff remained silent for a long moment. He was not a man who made quick decisions. He had built his life on careful thought. I will not answer today, he finally said. Marriage is not a small matter. I must consider many things. Aisha nodded. That is fair. Thank you for listening. As she walked toward the gate, he added, You have shown bravery today. That is not something I ignore. Those simple words gave her more strength than she expected. When she stepped back onto the street, her heart was still racing. But something had changed. She had faced her fear. She had spoken with honesty. She went there, one of them whispered, surprised. Impossible, another said, but she had. By evening, news began to spread. The servant had mentioned to someone that the widow had visited. By sunset, half the village knew. People waited eagerly for the sheriff's reaction. They expected him to publicly reject her. They expected anger. They expected humiliation. But nothing happened. The sheriff did not make any announcement. He did not insult her. He did not send any message of refusal. Days passed. This silence confused everyone. At the tea stall, the men who had started the joke grew restless. Why has he not rejected her yet? One asked. Maybe he is too busy, another replied. But deep inside, they felt uneasy. What if their bet did not go the way they expected? Inside his home, the sheriff thought deeply about her proposal. He observed his daughter playing in the courtyard. He remembered his late wife and the promises he had made to himself after her passing. He had decided long ago that he would not remarry unless it truly benefited his daughter. He began asking quiet questions about Aisha. He spoke to neighbors, shopkeepers, and even a distant relative of hers. The answers surprised him. She is respectful. She works hard. She never speaks badly of anyone. She has suffered quietly but never caused trouble. Not once did anyone accuse her of bad character. He also heard about the cruel whispers labeling her as unable to have children, but when he asked if there had ever been medical proof, no one had an answer. It was all assumption. Meanwhile, Aisha returned to her daily life. She continued stitching clothes. She avoided unnecessary conversations. She did not try to defend herself against gossip. At night, doubt tried to enter her heart again. What if he said no? Would the humiliation be worse than before? But she reminded herself that she had already done something powerful. She had chosen action over fear. One afternoon, nearly 2 weeks later, a messenger from the sheriff's house knocked on her door. Her hands froze. The sheriff requests to speak with you and your guardian tomorrow, the messenger said politely. Her heart pounded loudly. Across the village, the tea stall buzzed with excitement. Tomorrow, one of the men said confidently. He will reject her. You'll see. But they had no idea that the sheriff's thoughts had moved far beyond their childish bet. And as night fell over the village, Aisha once again stood in her quiet courtyard, looking up at the sky. Whatever the answer would be, she had already proven something important. She was not a joke. She was not a burden. She was a woman brave enough to ask for a second chance. And sometimes that courage alone begins to change everything. The next day felt longer than any day Aisha had ever lived. From early morning, her heart would not calm down. Every small sound outside her gate made her look up. She had informed her uncle, who lived nearby and acted as her guardian after her husband passed away. He was a quiet man who believed in respect and dignity. When she told him about the sheriff's message, he did not scold her. He simply nodded and said, If your intention is honest, then do not fear. The same tall white walls stood before them, but this time Aisha felt slightly different. The fear was still there, but it was mixed with something else. Readiness. Whatever answer she received, she would accept it with grace. The sheriff welcomed them into the courtyard and offered them seats. His daughter was inside the house, peeking quietly through a curtain. She had heard about the visitor from days before. She was curious but unsure. The conversation began formally. The sheriff spoke to her uncle first, asking about family background, responsibilities, and intentions. Her uncle answered calmly. He made it clear that Aisha was not looking for charity or wealth. She only wanted stability and respect. Then the sheriff looked at Aisha. "I have thought carefully," he said in a steady voice. "Marriage is not only about two people, it affects families and children. I asked about your character," he continued. "Everyone spoke of your patience and hard work. No one questioned your honesty." At least her quiet efforts had not gone unnoticed. The sheriff took a slow breath. "If we move forward, it will not be because of pity. It will be because I believe you can bring peace to this home." For a moment, Aisha could not understand his words. Her uncle leaned forward slightly. "Does that mean?" "Yes," the sheriff said clearly. "I am willing to accept this proposal." Silence filled the courtyard, but this time it was not heavy. It was powerful. Aisha lowered her head, tears gathering in her eyes. Not tears of sadness, tears of relief. She had prepared herself for rejection, but instead she had been given respect. The sheriff added gently, "This will be a simple marriage. No unnecessary show, and my daughter's comfort will always come first." "I understand," Aisha replied softly. "I will care for her as my own." There were no loud announcements, no large celebrations. News still spread quickly through the village, but people reacted with shock rather than joy. At the tea stall, the men who had made the bet stared at each other in disbelief. "He agreed?" one of them asked. "It cannot be," another said. But it was true. Their joke had turned into a reality they never expected. On the day of the wedding, the ceremony was small and simple. Only close relatives and a few respected elders attended. Aisha wore a modest dress, not heavy or flashy. The sheriff stood calmly beside her. There were no grand decorations, but there was sincerity. Some villagers watched from a distance, whispering among themselves, "Why would he marry her? He could have chosen someone else." Maybe he felt sorry for her. But none of them truly knew what had been discussed in that quiet courtyard. When Aisha stepped into the sheriff's house as his wife, she felt both grateful and nervous. This was not just a new home. It was a new beginning. The first person she truly wanted to win over was his daughter Zara. The young girl was around 9 years old, with observant eyes and a quiet nature. She had grown up missing her mother deeply. The idea of someone new entering her home felt strange to her. On the first evening, Aisha approached Zara gently. She did not try to force affection. "I know this is new for you," she said softly. "I am not here to replace anyone. I am here to care for you if you allow me." She simply nodded and walked away. But she did not show anger either. The early days were delicate. Aisha woke up before everyone else, preparing breakfast and organizing the house. She respected the sheriff's routines. She kept her voice calm. She avoided unnecessary changes in the home. Slowly, small moments began to build trust. One afternoon, Zara struggled with her school homework. Aisha noticed but did not interfere. After a while, she gently asked, "Would you like some help?" Zara hesitated, then handed over her notebook. Aisha patiently explained each question. When Zara finally understood and smiled slightly, it felt like a quiet victory. The sheriff observed these interactions carefully. He did not express emotions easily, but he noticed the difference. The house, once silent and strict, now felt warmer. Meals were prepared with care. The courtyard seemed more alive. Weeks turned into months. However, the village did not stop watching. People counted time, then 6. Whispers began again. "Has she given any good news?" Maybe we were right. The same old assumption returned, that she could never become a mother. At the tea stall, the men who had lost their bet tried to regain pride by spreading doubt. "Just wait," one said. "Time will show the truth." Inside the sheriff's house, Aisha heard some of these whispers through neighbors. Each word hurt, but she refused to let it control her. She focused on building her home. One evening while serving dinner, she noticed the sheriff looking thoughtful. "Are you troubled?" she asked gently. He hesitated before speaking. "People talk," he said simply. "They always do," she replied with a small smile. He studied her face. "Does it bother you?" "It used to," she admitted, "but I cannot live my life according to their voices." He respected that answer. A full year passed after their marriage. There was still no child. Pressure slowly increased. Some distant relatives suggested medical checkups. Some gave advice without being asked. A few even hinted that perhaps the sheriff had made a mistake. Through all of this, Aisha remained patient. She did not argue. She did not complain. But at night, when everyone slept, she sometimes sat alone in the courtyard, staring at the stars. She wondered if her past was following her again. One day she gathered courage and spoke to the sheriff. "I think we should visit a doctor in the city," she said calmly. "You believe that is necessary?" "Yes," she replied. "Not because of people, but because we deserve clarity." The decision was private. They did not announce it to anyone. They traveled quietly to the city for medical consultation. For the first time, proper tests were done, something that had never happened before. The process required patience and time. Aisha remained in the city longer than expected for follow-up visits. To avoid village gossip and stress, she decided to stay with a distant relative during that period. Back in the village, her absence sparked fresh rumors. Maybe she ran away. Maybe she could not face the truth. It became a center of careless talk. But the sheriff did not react to gossip. He knew the truth of where she was and why. Weeks turned into months. Then one day, a letter arrived from the city. The sheriff read it quietly. His serious face softened for the first time in many months. When he looked up at the sky that evening, there was something new in his eyes. Hope. The village still believed their story was predictable. They thought they already knew the ending. But life, as it often does, was preparing to turn none of them expected. And in the quiet space between rumor and reality, something beautiful was beginning to grow. When Aisha left for the city, she told only a few people the real reason. To the rest of the village, it simply looked like she had gone to visit a distant relative. She carried one medium-sized bag filled with simple clothes and a few personal items. She did not look back when the cart moved away from the sheriff's house, but her heart felt heavy. Inside her, there was a mixture of hope and fear. The medical visits in the city were not easy. Hospitals were large and unfamiliar. The waiting rooms were always full. She had to answer many questions, some of which made her uncomfortable. For years, people had spoken about her without proof. Now, she finally wanted real answers. The sheriff visited her during the first few days, staying close and supportive. He spoke to the doctor seriously, asking clear questions. For the first time, both of them were facing the issue with facts instead of rumors. After several tests, the doctor explained something that surprised them both. There had never been proper medical examination during her first marriage. No one could have known the truth. Assumptions had been made without knowledge. The doctor reassured them that there was no confirmed reason to lose hope. The treatment required patience and less stress. The doctor advised her to remain calm and stay away from negative pressure. That was one reason she decided to remain in the city for some time. Back in the village, however, people created their own stories. At the tea stall, the men who had once made the cruel bet returned to their favorite topic. "She has not come back," one of them said, sipping tea. "Maybe she finally realized she could not stay," another replied. "Maybe the sheriff discovered the truth," someone added with a smirk. They laughed lightly, convincing themselves that their earlier judgment had been correct. Meanwhile, inside the sheriff's house, life felt different without Aisha. The courtyard seemed quieter again. Zara missed her more than she expected. At first she had been unsure about having a new mother figure. But over time she had grown used to Aisha's gentle presence. One evening Zara asked her father, "When will she return?" "Soon," he answered calmly. He did not explain details, he simply trusted the process. Weeks passed, then months. Aisha followed every medical instruction carefully. She ate properly, rested well, and prayed regularly. Slowly, her strength returned. There was a new glow in her face, one that came from silent hope. Then, one morning after a follow-up visit, the doctor smiled warmly. "Congratulations," the doctor said. "You are expecting." For a moment, Aisha could not breathe. The words felt unreal. She held the edge of the chair to steady herself. Tears filled her eyes before she could stop them. All those years of whispers, all those labels, all those assumptions. And now, this simple sentence had changed everything. She informed the sheriff immediately. When he received the news, he closed his eyes quietly for a few seconds. He was not a man who showed emotions openly, but his heart felt lighter than it had in years. He made a decision. "Stay there until you are stronger," he told her. "Return only when you feel safe and ready." They both understood what that meant. The village had not been kind. Stress was not good for her health, so she remained in the city quietly, carrying her growing hope inside her. Only a trusted relative knew the full truth. Back in the village, gossip became louder. It has been too long. If everything was fine, she would have returned. The tea stall conversations grew more confident. "You see, "We were right from the beginning," one man declared proudly. Even some women shook their heads in disappointment. They felt the sheriff had taken a risk and failed, but the sheriff never responded to any of it. He continued his work with dignity. When people tried to ask indirect questions, he simply said, "She will return at the right time." His calmness confused everyone. Months passed. Then, on a warm morning nearly 8 months after her departure, a simple cart entered the village quietly. It was not decorated. It did not make noise. It moved slowly down the main road. Some children noticed first. Someone is coming," they shouted playfully. As the cart moved closer to the sheriff's house, curious eyes began to follow it. When it stopped in front of the tall white gate, the driver stepped down and helped a woman carefully out of the cart. It was Aisha. She looked slightly thinner but peaceful. Her eyes held a new soft. In her arms, wrapped carefully in a light blanket, was a small baby. For a moment, the entire street froze. A woman carrying water stopped mid-step. A shopkeeper leaned forward. Even the tea stall fell silent. "Is that?" someone whispered. The sheriff stepped out of the gate as if he had been waiting. Their eyes met. No words were needed. He walked toward her calmly and looked down at the tiny face in her arms. The baby was sleeping peacefully, unaware of the storm of disbelief surrounding them. "It's a boy," she said softly. The sheriff's expression changed slightly. A rare, genuine smile appeared. Within minutes, people gathered outside the gate. They tried to understand what they were seeing. How was this possible? Was this kept secret? Questions filled the air, but no one dared to speak too loudly. The same men from the tea stalls stood at a distance, staring in shock. Their earlier laughter felt distant and foolish. Inside the house, Zara approached slowly. She looked at the baby with wide eyes. "Is he staying with us?" she asked. "Yes," Aisha replied gently. "He is your brother." Zara's face slowly brightened. She reached out carefully to touch the baby's tiny hand. Outside, the whispers continued. Some people tried to create new stories to protect their pride. Others simply stood silent, realizing that their assumptions had been wrong. That evening, the sheriff stepped out to address a few elders who had gathered politely. "There were medical reasons for her stay in the city," he said calmly. "We chose privacy to protect her health. The child is ours." His voice was firm and clear. There was no anger in it, only dignity. No one argued. The tea stall remained unusually quiet that night. The men who had once joked about sending her as a bet avoided eye contact with each other. The village had believed it knew her story. It had written her future without asking her. But life had written something else. Inside the house, as night settled, Aisha sat in the courtyard once again, the same place where she had once cried in silence. Now, the soft sound of a baby breathing filled the air. The journey had not been easy. The loneliness, the gossip, the fear, all of it had tested her strength. But she had chosen patience over anger, courage over shame. And now, as she looked at her sleeping child, she understood something deeply. The greatest answers do not come from arguing with the world. They come quietly, in their own time, and sometimes silence itself becomes the strongest reply.